and I've seen a lot of old videos and stuff that's out. So I think that it's time for a new JavaScript course to be out that focuses on front end, back end, and how they mix together. A lot of courses have things like, okay, you have the JavaScript basics, you have your front end and stuff like that, but they don't really put it together for you. Or they might say, hey, just use React or something, but why would you use React instead of something else? This is what that course is going to do for you. So we could create a new file and name it something like, this could be basic1.html. And with JavaScript, if you don't know, it is the behavior behind web pages or mobile apps or anything like the sort. HTML is the structure and CSS is the styling of it, or how you want it to look. But JavaScript plays a very, very important part. We can name this basics. A few ways that you could put JavaScript into your file or into your website or app or whatever you're making. You can say script, and I press tab, just to do the auto complete. And this is one way that we can put JavaScript into our page. And we can say something like console.log. We're going to say hello world. Oh, we're not there yet. So hello world. And when we run this, we open our HTML page in our web. And now when we actually go to our developer tools, we can look at the console and see what it says, because we are actually logging something to the console. And I'll explain that in a second. But you see hello world right at the bottom there. If we go back to our code, we have our first bit of code and our first way of putting JavaScript into our project. This says, hey, log something to the console. Our console is, in the browser's case, our web page. So it says, hey, log hello world to our console, to our actual console. So another way that we can actually put in JavaScript is we can reference another file. So we can say script, and again you can just press tab, and there you go. And now we have source. You can press enter, and we could say something like that slash let's say basic1.js, because we're referencing a JavaScript file. So we create a new file, and you can say basics1.js, and we can look at our HTML just to make sure that we named it correctly. And now we can say console.log hello world from a JavaScript file. Save that, and we can run this again, refresh it, and now we have two hello worlds. Hello world from a JavaScript file, and it shows exactly where it's coming from. It's coming from our basic1.js, and our first script is coming from basic1.html. So that's how you log things to the console, and how you can separate your code. So we're just going to use our reference and then work with our JavaScript inside of there. So our first thing that we want to learn about is how to make comments. Now, comments is extremely, extremely important, because you want to send a comment to someone else, or you don't want something changed, or you want to explain something a bit further. You will use a comment. A comment, when it's run, the person won't be able to see it, or like a user of your website won't be able to see it. So this is how you make your first comment, these two slash lines. So this is a single line comment. And if you need more space, you can create a multi-line comment. And that's with the trail and our asterisks. And we can say something like multi-line comment. And as you can see, it's kind of grayed out. So that indicates that, hey, this is not going to be available. And then let's run that again. And you see nothing. We don't see our first, all we see is our script. We don't see our first coda. We don't see our comments. So a comment is very important. In a way that you would use something like a comment, if you want to explain something further, you would say, this prints hello world. So now that brings us to our next subject, which is something called data types. Now data types is nothing new, it's actually very, very basic. There's different ways of representing your data. And if we have, like, say, a word that we want to print to the console or something like that, we will use something called a string. Now a string is represented as something inside our quotations. So something like hello. That would be a string. And instead, what if we wanted like a number or something like that? There's 6 different data types that represents different data that we can use inside of our programs. So for a number, we have our something called the Boolean, and we can say Boolean, and this will all be commented out. So we can say Boolean, and then it will be either true or false. That will evaluate to something that's true or false, or we can use the actual terms true or false in our code to explain something further or make some code run later on, or anything you like. Our next thing is something called a symbol, and I will get to that in a second, but it's kind of weird, so we'll get to it when we need to. So we're going to make our comments that say string, and this would be a number or integer, so we can say number, and this would be an integer or int in other languages. We have our symbol, so we say something like new symbol, something like that, and we'll use that in a moment. Well, not really in this lesson, but we'll use that later. Our next thing is undefined. So if the program is looking for something and it can't find that answer or something like that, it will come back as undefined. If it's not a string or a number or a Boolean or a symbol or something like that, the program will return to you undefined because there's nothing to return back to you or return back to the user. Our last thing is null, and that just means nothing. We can set certain things to null and use that and be able to use that in our programs in a meaningful way. So that's our data types, and that's our primary data types. So we can say something like primary data types. And now the next subject that I would like to touch on is variables. You would use the primary data types and combine them to actually make a program do something. But we need a way to store whatever we want the program's data to be. So we can store like something like our name or our age or a user's username or a user's password or something like that, and then be able to reference it later and use it in another part of our code. So a variable is 3 different ways to make a variable. So we can say, let's make a comment here so we know what we're talking about. And we say variables. Very similar to math, basically. But one way to create a variable, and this is like an older way, but we can say var. Var, and we can say older way. The way that var works, we can say var, let's say my name, and then we can say Ty. And now we can console.log. Remember that we are logging something to our console that's actually down here. And we can say, now we can reference my name. We don't have to keep saying Ty. We can say my name. And now if we run this, okay, we get an error because I actually did a lot of errors before. So go to line 20, and we have to actually blank that out. Blank that out. Blank this out as well. Let's just blank this out just in case. Make sure that we don't have any errors. So we have Ty. Now we can keep on referencing this thing. We can say console.log my name again, right? Now we don't have to keep saying Ty. We can just keep referencing our variable. It also works the same with numbers, with Booleans, or anything like that. It's all the same. We can use a Boolean like var. This will be true, something like that, and then say true, right? And now when we console.log it, we can say this, and this will come up. This will be true. We run that, true, because it's referencing true. It's not saying, hey, this will be true like the string, but it's referencing a Boolean, so that output would be true. Another way to create a variable, and this is like a newer way, is two different ways. It's called let and constant, or const. So these are newer ways to declare a variable. And how let and const work is, one thing would be constant, like something like your name, your first name would always be constant, because when you're creating it, say you say constant, and now you're going to say my first name, because that would never change. That would be a constant. That would be immutable. So you can say Taekwon, right? That's not going to change. But something like my age might change. And now that's where let comes in, because it is mutable. So you can say something like let, and then you can say let my age equals 30. So now it works exactly the same. We can say console.log it again, and we can say my first name, and it will print just like we thought. And we can say console.log again, and we can say my age. The only difference between these two variables, between the two variable references, are the constant and the let. Remember that constants are like forever. It's like 3.14 is pi. There's no change in that. You can't really change it. You would get an error. But with let, that can be changed all the time. Whenever you need, like, your age, your birthday comes around, that's going to change because you're going to get a year older. So we use let for that. Constants, you can't change it. With let, you definitely can change it. We can also create many references on one line. So we can say let x equal 4, right? Because of course we can do numbers. We can reference numbers. We can reference anything. And then we can say now y equals 10, right? And then z equals 15. And now we only use let one time, but because of this comma, we can use multiple references. So we can say console.log and let's log out z. So now z comes up, and that's 15, and that's on line 46. Whenever you get confused or something like that, you can go right to line 46, or you can view it over here, and you can find out where that exact statement came from. So our next thing is reassigning. Again, remember that constant things are not mutable, like they're immutable. You can't change them. And let is mutable. You can always change those. So with let, you can also reassign things. So let's say let my score, right? And that's going to be like equal to 0, right? We're going to start a new game. We're going to have them equal to 0, and then that's going to change. But then I may want to, whenever the game is looping, whenever someone scores, you could say my score now equals to 5, and that's called reassigning. So, and we can see how that works in a second, but we can console.log this out and say my score, run that. Okay, it says 0, and then now we make our next console.log, and then reference my score again. And now it's 5, because that let is letting us reassign it. It's letting us be changed. Now let's say we want to change my first name. My first name equals John. And if you didn't notice yet, every time there's an end of a statement, we make a semicolon. It's like a period. Like you're saying, this is the end of my sentence, this is the end of what I want to say, so I'm going to end it off. But in our case, we're going to end it off with a semicolon. So let's say console.log semicolon, because we ending our statement, and my first name. And now we have an uncaught error, because you cannot reassign a constant. You can only reassign let, or you could reassign a var. But I would just tell you to use let or const, or get used to using let or const if you were using var before. It's just a new way of doing it, and with the things with scope and stuff like that, it'll mess you up. So let's get back to strings and get back to our data types. Now our first data type is a string, and this you can do many things with it, and you can reference it in many ways. There are so many things you can do with a string that people make programs just based on that. So again, how do you make a string? You can say var say hi, right? Or you can say let, because this is 2018, so let say hi equals hi. We can reference that with a double quote, or we can say a single quote, hi, right? As long as we end it off right. It doesn't really matter how you use it, as long as it's in quotes. So again, we console.log it, or we can reference it. But now there's other things that we can do with it. So we can grab it and say, hey, what's the length of this? How many characters are in this actual string? If there's a certain amount of characters, we might want to do something with it. But there is a way of getting the exact number of the exact number of characters in a string. So we can say something like console.log, or let's make a new variable. So we can say let say hi length, right? And then now we can say hi dot. This is called dot notation. It's grabbing like a property or something that's attached to the strings of something that we can do. there's a lot of things called methods and properties that attach to our primitive data that help us out and let us do whatever we want to do with them. So our first one is length, right? Say hi length. And now if we console.log say hi length, okay, hold on, we gotta comment that out. Comment our last constant out, because remember we changed it. So let's make a reference to that. So attempting to mutate a constant. It failed. And then we can actually grab these. And here's a shortcut. We can grab both of these and press Control / and now they're both commented out. So we run this. And now our string has 2 characters in it. And that's true. Hi has only 2 characters in it. So now, just like I said, that things have properties, strings and numbers and everything else that we're going to create has a thing called methods. And methods are things that you want to, grab from the string or grab from whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to do with the string, you create a method for it, or you use one of the predefined methods. So we're going to go through a lot of the predefined methods for you. So our first method that we're going to look at is the uppercase. With strings and stuff, you're going to need like to uppercase some things, or if you have like a paragraph running or something like that, you may need to uppercase a certain letter. Or if you're shouting or something like that, or you want your program to explain something in a dramatic way, you will use something like uppercase. So we can console.log, and we're going to go through these methods kind of quick. I'm just going to briefly explain what they are and then just show you how to use them real quick. And then we can say something like say hi dot to uppercase. And that's a method. So with the method, when you attach something like a method, you have to put the parentheses at the end. Not like how we did with length. When you have a property, there is no parentheses at the end. It's just referencing, a certain number or something like that. In our case, the string, how many characters it is. But when we're actually doing something to our data, it's a method. So we have to put those parentheses at the end. It's like working. And when we get into functions and stuff, you're going to understand more of it. So if we console.log say hi to uppercase, and let's dramatically put everything down because everything is going to be lowercase. This is going to grab it and, make everything capitalized. So we have hi capitalized. And let's just make something a little longer so we can say hi, greetings from basic 1.js, something like that, right? So we grab that, and now that's going to change. Greetings from basic 1.js, all in capital letters. And we can also do the same thing, and we can make it all lowercase. So say we have basic 1.js, right? Something that's really, really dramatic. And this helps when someone is making like a username or something for your website. You can grab this stuff and then make it all lowercase so that your database can handle it, or the next programmer can handle it. So you can say capitalize, and now we're gonna have lowercase everything. So we can say console.log again, and we can say hi dot to lowercase, just like uppercase but lower. And again, this is a method, so we are putting the parentheses at the end. We are actually doing something to our string. You see this dot? That means we're doing something to whatever is in front of this dot. So in our case, we are lowercasing anything that's in front of this dot. Whatever it is, the program doesn't even know what it is, but we know that it's just going to lowercase it, whatever it is. It knows that it's a string. As long as it's a string, it's going to lowercase it. So we have greetings from basic 1 and all lowercase. Our next method that we're going to look at is index of. Now, index of is a way of finding something that's in your string. Say you're looking for a certain word or a certain letter. If our greetings from basic 1 has an S in it, then we want the user to win a prize or something like that. You would use something like index of to actually see if it's actually there for you. So we use this in the same way, just like it's a method, so we're using it just like everything else. And now we're gonna have index of, and then we're gonna say hi dot index of, and then now what are we actually looking for? And now this is the reason why we actually have parentheses, is what are we looking for? What are we going to search for? So we can say something like, what position is this in? Or does this have this in it? So we can say something like, let's look for a B, right? Or we can look for the O. So look for an O, and what position is this in? What's the position of this letter or whatever? So we console.log that, we run this, oh, it's at position 12. So we can start from the first, and again, this is a computer, so everything starts from 0. 0 is a real number. In mathematics, 0 is a real number. In computers, 0 is a real number. So we start from 0. So we say the G is 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The O is in the 12th position. Now, what if we're looking for something that's not in our, like, what if something is not in our actual string? We can look for it again and say we're looking for a Z, and our Z is obviously not inside of our string. So if a person puts in Z or something like that in their string, they win a special prize or something. You always have to think of what kind of program you can actually build with the knowledge. So we can say hi dot index of again, and let's look for Z. Now we know that this isn't in our thing, so let's make another comment and say it's located at position 12. Z is not in our string. So when we actually look for Z, we don't know what we're gonna get, but we're not gonna get an error because this is a real thing. So they gracefully like degraded it for you. If it's not in there, you get a -1. So if we run this, we get our -1. So whatever is not inside of our string, you will always get that return of -1, and you can do whatever you want with it. And there's a whole program that you can make off of, hey, if it's not in here, do this, then do this, and then do this. Our next one is includes, and now this is pretty new, so we're going to say includes. Now if something is inside of the string, it'll return our Boolean data type, which was true and false, and it's going to return true. If it's not in our string, it's going to return false, and then we could create programs based off of that as well. So we can say console.log, and we can actually take this and we can say console.log, and instead of index of, we say includes. So now this is all this is saying is, does this string include a O? And it does. It's true. So it should return true. And that's great. Now, what if we take this again and we say, does this include our Z? It's going to return false. False. And that's all what include does. Now, that's pretty great when you're working with different strings or different URLs or something like that. Hey, does this include this? No, it doesn't. So do this. Does it include this? Yes, it does. Let's switch to another program or something like that. Starts with is the same thing. Just like includes, but we're asking, does this string start with a certain character or a certain letter? So we say starts with. So we can say, again, console.log these out. And all we're doing is changing the method. So we say starts with. And again, we say starts with instead of includes. But it's still a method, so the parentheses are there. So, hey, does this start with, let's say, a G? Because that's going to return true. But does it start with a Z? No, it doesn't. We go back to our thing. Hey, it does start with a G. And we can say uppercase G because it is case sensitive. All of these are case sensitive. So does this start with an uppercase G? Yes, it does. Does it start with a lowercase Z? No, it doesn't. That returns false. So we run that. And now we have our true, false, and we can make sure that it's coming from a place because it's coming from line 80 of basic1.js. Go back over there, and that's line 80 right here. And they go line 81 for our false. Another thing that we can do with a string is concatenate them. Now that's actually like putting together a string. So we can say something like concat, right? Put together a string or build a string. So we could say something like, let's say let string builder or something like that equal let's say JavaScript. Right? Now we have our string builder, and then we can say, well, we don't have a string builder, but we have a variable called string builder. You can name it whatever you want. And we can say string builder, and just like starts with, includes, and index of, and lowercase, and things like that, we say our dot, and we say concat. Now, what do we want to concat? We want to say JavaScript is great, right? And now we have our concatenation going on. It's putting together these two strings, this JavaScript and this string right here, because it's referencing, it's getting referenced right here. So we run this concat method on it with is great. So if we run this, we have JavaScript is great, but there's a problem because we need some space. And now we can put it right there, add a space. Now if we run this, JavaScript is great. And now that's combining two different terms. So we can say something like let is great equal, and then we can grab this whole string. And we can say it's great. We put our semicolon right there because that's the end of our statement. And now we can say is great. We reference that, and same thing happens. JavaScript is great. Now that's an easy way of putting together two strings, but there is an easier way with using just the plus sign. Just like we're adding up two numbers or something like that, we can say console.log, and we can say string builder, reference that, plus is great. And when we run this, it's concatenating for us. We don't have to use this method. It's cool if you do, but we don't have to. And we have again, JavaScript is great. being referenced at line 87, which is our 87. So that's two different ways of putting together strings or using the variables and not just your actual references. You should always reference whatever you're using. It'll make it easier to work with, easier to increment, decrement, whatever you want. Another method that we're going to look at is our trim method. So say something gets a little sloppy, right? So trim. This deletes white space at the end of your string. So say we referencing something like let nickname equal, and we have a thing. We can say Tony Bananas, right? But the person forgot. He or she must have leaned on this, and now we have a whole bunch of white space. And this is how your program received it. We can use a method called trim on it to actually delete that white space. It only works at the end of our string, not at the beginning, not at the middle. So if Tony Bananas does this, Tony Bananas' name is going to be like that. But if he or she messes up and like leans on the keyboard or something and leaves all of this white space, we could clean that up for them. So we could say .trim. And if we do this, well, let's console.log what it would be at first. And it probably won't even see anything, but nickname, right? So if we run this, we have all of this. Oh, okay, it does. Okay, so this is all of the white space that your program will have. This is what your database will see. It would just see a whole bunch of different characters, different things that's meaningless. But if we use that trim on it, now we don't see any white space behind it. This blue emptiness represents how much space was in our program, or what was inside of our string. But with this one, there is none. So we're all good. Trim is actually a very, very, very useful tool. The last method that we're going to go through is a repeater. So before you used to have to use like pluses or something like that, or multiplications to say hi 3 times or something like that. But now we have something called the repeat method. So we can say repeat. This repeats whatever you give it. So we can say repeat, and now we can say console.log, and let's make our reference, because we should always make a reference. So we can say let hello times 3 or something like that. Hello x3. So this is going to say hello times 3, and now we can reference it, and we can say hello, make our end of our statement, hello. And now, what if we want to say hello 3 times? We can say hello times 3 dot repeat. How many times do you want to repeat it? We're going to repeat it 3 times, so we put our number right there. And this says how many times do you want to repeat it. And now if we run this, we have hello, 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 hello. If we want to change it, we can say hello, bang, put a little space right there. And now we have hello, hello, hello. My last thing that we're going to talk about in this lesson is something called template literals. Now this is a little bit different, and it actually helps a lot. Template literals is just like quotation marks and stuff like that, but it replaces it. Now it makes it easier to work with. So say you have something like this, right? And we need a thing to say they're there, right? There. They are there, right? And say we have our single quotation marks. Now we have a problem here because we need to actually escape this, and we would have to use something like that or this, or something crazy like that to actually make it work for us to actually come out. But now we have something called a template literal, and we can delete this, and we can use our backticks to actually point out what our string is, or what anything is. We can say they're there, right? Again. And now we can put our thing right there, and it doesn't affect our string in the least bit because we're using a backtick. We're not using double quotation marks. We're not using anything like that. And it's located right under your escape key. And we'll be probably using that for the rest of the course. But another thing that is great about this is that you can actually do JavaScript right in the console. So we can say our backtick and then say something like, this is the answer for 2 times 2. And now we can put our JavaScript right there by referencing this, putting our $ in 2 brackets and saying like something like 2 times 2. Now our answer is going to be put right there. So when this is being built in our console, it's going to say the answer for 2 times 2 is 4. And we can say is and then 4. So we reference it and we get it. The answer for 2 times 2 is 4. And that's basically it for this lesson. Another thing that we're going to want to do, we can say something like console.log and backtick it out, right? And we can say something like our $ and we can say hello times 3 dot, and let's say repeat, right? Repeat, and let's say 8 times. We put our JavaScript right into our console.log or right into whatever program we're doing with the help of these backticks. So I encourage you to use them all of the time. Whenever you want to evaluate something like that, we can say something like, we are going crazy with the hellos. And then we can reference that. So if we run this, we're going crazy with the hellos. Hello, 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 hello. We put that right inside of our console.log. So enjoy, keep practicing. Just look at this over. The thing is going to be in our GitHub. It's going to be in my description and things like that. You have a good day. Have a good night. Practice, practice, practice. Look ahead. Keep going. Have a good day.